In tonight's news edition, Israeli occupation troops shoot and kill 2 Palestinians after ramming their cars into Israeli soldiers. The Turkish president warns Russia not to play with fire in a dispute over the downing of a Russian warplane, but that Turkey does not want to harm relations with Moscow. And Pope Francis arrives in Uganda for the second leg of his Africa tour and urges world leaders to fight climate change and poverty. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. A Palestinian slammed his car into a group of Israeli soldiers, wounding 6 in Beit Umar near the city of Hebron before being shot dead. A few hours earlier, another Palestinian rammed his car into Israeli soldiers at a bus stop near a Jewish settlement. He was shot dead by a civilian and 2 Israeli soldiers were injured. A wave of Israeli-Palestinian violence that began more than 8 weeks ago has shown no end in sight. It is the worst unrest since last year's Israeli war on Gaza and has prompted talk of a new Palestinian uprising against Israel. Police and the Palestinian health minister said the driver was the brother of a man who last Sunday had been shot dead in a similar incident nearby. Hundreds attended the funeral of 20-year-old Palestinian Khalal Jawabre at a Arub refugee camp near Hebron. The Palestinian Health Ministry said Jawabre was shot by Israeli forces during clashes in the camp yesterday and died in hospital. Also yesterday, Israeli troops killed 2 more Palestinians in confrontations in the occupied West Bank. Israeli military commanders and Netanyahu's right-wing government argued over the right strategy to end 2 months of stabbings and shootings in which about 100 Palestinians and 20 Israelis were killed. The Palestinians have accused Israel of using excessive force to quell attacks, saying that in many cases, assailants could have been stopped and detained without being shot and killed. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan warned Russia not to play with fire in a dispute over the downing of a Russian warplane this week, but added he did not want to harm relations with Moscow. Erdogan told supporters during a speech in Beirut in northeast Turkey he may speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin at a climate summit in Paris next week. Putin has so far refused to contact Erdogan because Ankara does not want to apologize for the downing of the jet. In Moscow, meanwhile, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Ankara has crossed the line by shooting down a Russian warplane this week and warned the incident could severely undermine Turkey's interests. Lavrov said at the start of talks with Syrian counterpart Walid al-Muallim that Turkey had crossed a line of permissibility. During the press conference, Muallim welcomed the proposal by his French counterpart Laurent Fabius to include the Syrian army in efforts to battle Daesh. However, Fabius was forced to backtrack later, saying this will only be possible in the framework of a political transition in Syria. Russia's Vladimir Putin said Russia will keep cooperating with the United States and its partners to fight Daesh in Syria, but that cooperation will be in jeopardy if there are any repeats of Turkey's shooting down of a Russian jet. Speaking after talks in the Kremlin with French President François Hollande, Putin voiced lingering anger at Turkey's actions, saying he viewed the downing of the jet as an act of betrayal by a country Moscow had thought was its friend. Putin said under the cooperation already established with the U.S.-led coalition, Russia's military had passed on details of the flight plan of the jet that was shot down. He also confirmed that military activity close to the Turkish border intensified after the downing of the plane. Hollande said it is essential during this period to avoid any risk and any new incident and to avoid any escalation. The only objective that we all should have is the fight against Daesh and the neutralization of the terrorists. In the ongoing war against terrorism, the United States and its allies staged 18 airstrikes against Daesh in Iraq. According to a statement by the Combined Joint Task Force, the strikes near 5 cities included 7 near Ramadi that hit 2 of the militant group's tactical units and destroyed 4 of its buildings, among other targets. Near Sinjar, 5 strikes hit 3 Daesh tactical units and destroyed 1 of the group's vehicles and fighting positions. Also, a new wave of airstrikes targeting the Syrian city of Raqqa, the headquarters of the terrorist Daesh group and the focus of an international military campaign, killed at least 8 people, including 5 children. Russian warplanes also continued to target Syria's moderate opposition forces as part of the anti-terror airstrikes in support of Syria's Bashar al-Assad regime. Russia intensified airstrikes against Turkmen-populated areas in Latakia, which began 3 weeks ago. Meanwhile, Syrian rebels said they were targeting a Latakia airbase used by Russian forces. The fighters from the Ahrar al-Sham group said they were preparing for weapons for an assault on the Hmeimim base, where Russian warplanes have been setting off on bombing missions. Here's more.
Explosions across Syria's Hama province. Amateur video, which cannot be independently verified by Reuters, appears to show Russia on the offensive in Syria. More footage shows panic in the streets near the Turkish border, in a country where the war has already claimed the lives of some 250,000 people. Jets believed to be Russian target a depot for trucks waiting to go through a major rebel-controlled border crossing. Syrian jets have struck the area before, but if confirmed to have been carried out by Russia, it would be one of Moscow's closest airstrikes to Turkish territory, targeting a humanitarian corridor into rebel-held Syria and an important transit point for Syrian civilians crossing to Turkey. Earlier in the week, Turkey shot down a Russian jet, which it said entered its airspace. Russia said the plane never left Syrian airspace.
Pope Francis was welcomed by traditional music and dancers as he arrived in Uganda from Kenya for the second leg of his Africa tour. Earlier, the Pope said world leaders must reach a historic agreement to fight climate change and poverty at a forthcoming Paris talks, facing the stark choice of either improve or destroy the environment. This report has more.
The crowd erupts as Pope Francis enters the UN meeting hall in Nairobi, where talk turns to the environment, and the pontiff issues a warning.
In a few days, an important meeting on climate change will be held in Paris, where the international community will once again confront these issues. It would be sad, and I dare say even catastrophic, were particular interests to prevail over the common good and lead to manipulating information in order to protect their own plans and projects.
On Monday, Paris, still reeling from attacks that killed 130 people, will host a 2-week climate summit.
In this international environment, we are confronted with a choice which cannot be ignored, either to improve or to destroy the environment. Every step we take, whether large or small, individual or collective, in caring for creation opens a sure path for that generous and worthy creativity which brings out the best in human beings.
The Pope's next stop will be Uganda on Friday.
Spectators packed Manhattan's sidewalks yesterday to watch the marching bands, floats, and giant balloons of Macys' annual Thanksgiving Day parade. Outside of Macys' flagship store, crowds applauded at the procession of bands and musical acts from around the country and the helium balloons of cartoon characters that hovered over the parade route. The lines of people roared as the floats and balloons of such popular characters as Paddington Bear, the Pillsbury Doughboy, and Snoopy, who NBC said holds the record for most appearances, passed by. Musical performers like Mariah Carey belted out holiday classics to the 3.5 million spectators who turned out for the city's signature parade.
65th anniversary of their enduring comic strip. The big celebration began this year with the Peanuts movie.
Welcoming a brand new addition to our flock of
David Goffin recovered from a two-set deficit for the first time in his career to give Belgium a lead in the Davis Cup finals against Britain when he beat debutant Kyle Edmund 3-6, 1-6, 6-2, 6-1, 6-love. The world number 16 looked rigid with nerves in the opening two sets as 20-year-old Edmund, a surprise late choice for Britain's second singles spot, romped in front with some destructive baseline power. But the Belgians' greater experience finally began to tell as Edmund's gung-ho game started to crumble. Goffin broke serve in the third game of the third set, and the momentum quickly escalated. World number 2 Andy Murray will look to level the tie later today when he faces Ruben Belmont. Belgians have never won the Davis Cup and are appearing in the final for the first time since 1904 when they lost to Britain. It has been yet another turbulent, varied, and ultimately successful year for three-time Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton as he headed into the final race of the season with the title already in the bag. Hamilton, who secured his second successive title with Mercedes at the United States Grand Prix in October, will be hoping to end the season with a victory full of symbolism at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix on Sunday. The 30-year-old is chasing his 44th win on the 44th anniversary of the founding of the United Arab Emirates in car 44. Overall, Hamilton is heading into the season finale in relaxed fashion with both the drivers' and constructors' titles wrapped up in a dominant season.
You'll be another year older. We would have had this experience from this year. We'll for sure have just as many problems if
And finally, cold weather continues in most regions for the rest of tonight with southwesterly moderate winds. Tomorrow, fair conditions prevail in the hilly areas while it will be moderate in the Jordan Valley with some clouds and southwesterly moderate winds. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect moderate conditions tomorrow with northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. Israeli occupation troops shoot and kill 2 Palestinians after ramming their cars into Israeli soldiers. The Turkish president warns Russia not to play with fire in a dispute over the downing of a Russian warplane, but says Turkey does not want to harm relations with Moscow. And Pope Francis arrives in Uganda for the second leg of his Africa tour and urges world leaders to fight climate change and poverty. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.